All right, looks like we have everybody in. Welcome everybody to our spring professional enhancement seminar. We got a great lineup for you this week. I'm Sergeant Parson, our Sergeant at Arms, and I have the pleasure to announce our very own Command Chief, Chief Goldstrom, here to open up our event for us. Chief, over to you.
Hey, Sergeant Parson, thank you so much, and teammates, so great to see so many of you. If you can, please turn your cameras on. I'd love to see you. There's a lot of you that faces that I know, faces I'm familiar with, and others that I'm not. But just thank you for being here today. You know, as a briefer, as a speaker, one thing I've always been told, and something I've definitely learned over time, is your audience remembers the first thing that you say and the last thing that you say. So I want to just start off by thanking you. Thank you for what you do for Air Force Recruiting Service. Thank you for what you do for our applicants that you engage with daily. And then thank you for your leadership, right? Recognizing that this is the top 3 senior NCO PES. So I'm talking to primarily senior NCOs. I know that we have some other teammates on this call, but this is primarily geared towards our senior NCO Corps. So I just got out of a meeting with General Thomas. I did ask him, I said, hey, what do you want me to pass on to our senior NCOs and our command that we're engaging with today? And again, he just passes on his thank you. He passes on his thank you, and that we absolutely need your leadership, right? Because here next week, we'll have the Air Force Recruiting Service Senior Leader Conference. And what we're talking about is the new normal, right? And there's a lot about recruiting. There's a lot about Air Force Recruiting Service that are going to define what the new normal is. So I think you're going to see a blend of things that you saw and were familiar with in 2019. And then you're going to see several things as we come out of COVID and we've learned efficiencies through COVID. You're going to see the what's next, right? The new model of recruiting, the new Air Force Recruiting Service. So that he asked me to go ahead and pass that on. Specifically for this audience, I have just a couple of things to pass on. And then I'm going to quickly go through today. We do have, I'm doing a series of enlisted calls for Air Force Recruiting Service, recognizing that most of the folks that are on this call are senior NCOs will likely miss that session later on today. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the same content that I've been briefing during the enlisted calls, and we'll give that to you today, so you don't have to step away from this because you feel like you need to go to my E7 enlisted call later today, right? So I'm going to give you the same information. But a couple of things I want to pass on specifically for the PES is as you lead our airmen, right? So most of you are probably flight chiefs working within our recruiting service, maybe other positions within our recruiting service. The thing I'm going to ask you to do is make sure you take time to connect with our airmen. I mean, really connect with our airmen. Sit down and talk to them. Find out what's going on in their heads. Find out what's going on in their lives. You know, I can't tell you the number of times I've spent playing video games with airmen in the dorms or in a tent somewhere while deployed, just getting their perspective, getting their leadership philosophies, getting their thoughts on innovation, really finding ways to connect with our airmen and build trust. Because when you take time to sit down with our airmen and just pull up that chair, and that's a powerful tool that I definitely learned in my role as a command chief, is it's easy to walk into a room, say, hey, how's everyone doing? Everyone's doing okay? No one's got anything? Okay, I'm out. See ya. As a very young chief and as a very young command chief, I learned that lesson that there's no genuine connection that's happening. But when you take a chair and you pull it up to the table, and you say, hey, everyone come sit around this table, right? Then that's where connection starts. Because you're investing time. You're stopping everything that you're doing, and you're investing time with our airmen. So please, if you are not in the practice of doing that, please make the time to do that with our airmen. I think you'll find that the wealth that they're going to give you pales in comparison to the wealth that you might give them, right? So make sure you spend time connecting with our airmen. Listen to them. I mean, really listen to them. You know, I'm concerned that as an Air Force, as a people, as a society, as Americans, we've lost the art of being able to talk to people. We're so quick to sit down to talk to somebody, and we're quick to provide a response versus listening to understand that other person's perspective, right? We all have different experiences that shape our perspective, and we all want to share our perspective. but it's important to make sure that that perspective sharing goes with mutual respect and dialogue with one another. And I'm concerned that as an Air Force, as a people, as a country, as a culture, we're losing sight of that. So really take time to listen to our airmen. You as senior NCOs, you as organizational leaders in our command, it rests on your shoulders to make sure that we're listening. Chief Bass, who's a dear friend, posted on Facebook probably 2 or 3 weeks ago a whiteboard, and someone had wrote a message that the Air Force that your supervisors taught you doesn't exist today. And a lot of people got really twisted by that, right? Are you guys familiar with that whiteboard picture that I'm talking about? A lot of you are. I'm getting some head nods. There's some truth to that, right? So I've been in almost 28 years. I turned 46 here in 2 weeks. November is 28 years in the Air Force. And as I thought about this, I've served in 5 different Air Forces. Right? So when I came in November of 1993, a long time ago, right, we were the coming out of the Cold War Iraq containment Air Force, right? 3-month deployments, becoming expeditionary, okay? That lasted for about 6 or 7 years before we got into the global war on terrorism Air Force, right? 6-month deployments, vehicle operators and maintainers running convoys, 6-month deployments, 1-year deployments. In lieu of taskings, our airmen serving in Army billets, right? We went into the GWAT, the Global War on Terrorism Air Force. Then we turned into the downsizing Air Force, right? I had to let go of a lot of really good airmen in about the 2005, 2006 timeframe. I'll never forget Senior Airman Luis Ramirez. Because of our downsizing efforts, I had to sit down and have a conversation with him. There's no longer a place for you in our Air Force, and I'm sorry about that. And as he sat there and he cried, and I hugged him, and he told me, "What do I tell my parents?" I said, "Brother, I don't know." That was hard. That was really, really hard. Then we got into our fiscally constrained Air Force, right? We stopped going to graduations. We stopped going to TDY. We stopped going to training. We had fighter squadrons with jets parked out on ramps and flight lines. That was our fiscally constrained Air Force. And now we're in our near peer competition Air Force, right? We're talking about China. We're talking about Russia again. We're talking about hypersonic weapons. Those are the 5 different Air Forces that I've served in. So when I saw that whiteboard that Chief Bass posted, it made a lot of sense to me, right? So for those of you out there as recruiters that have been in the recruiting business for a really long time, is recruiting the same? Should it be the same than it was when you came into the business 5, 10, 15 years ago? That's a question I leave for all of you. That's a functional question that I'll leave you all to ponder. All right. And then work-life balance. So we just did a spouses survey. Tomorrow I have a Zoom call with our AFRS spouses. As I mentioned, I'm going through a series of Zoom calls, so tomorrow's the spouses. A lot of comments about our recruiters struggling with work-life balance. And boy, do I resemble that statement, right? I suck at work-life balance. I mean, coming off of a year of combat operations, being thrown into recruiting, I'm used to working 12, 14 hours a day. But sometimes I forget I've got a 14-year-old at home, right? And his picture's right here. You can't see it, but his picture's right here. And I've got it right next to my computer at the little clock that I look at. And every day at 17:30, I know it's time to go home because he's waiting. Because he needs help with homework, or he needs to talk about Boy Scouts. My wife puts dinner on the table every day at 1800, whether I'm home or not. If I'm in town, dinner's on the table at 1800. So if I want hot dinner, I better be home at 1800 to have dinner, right? That's her way of letting me know. That's her demand signal. That's the lever that she pulls to make sure I'm home and engaging with my family, right? So make sure our recruiters understand work-life balance, because there's a need at home just as much as there's a need at the office. And I'm talking to senior NCOs now. I'm talking to flight chiefs. I'm talking to graduated flight chiefs. You know how to manage that. I need you to help our tier 1 recruiters, our recruiters on the bag. I need you to help them manage it. All right? So that's my comments that I have for the top 3 PES. I'm going to go ahead and transition now No questions?
Hi, Chief. I'll speak.
Sergeant
um,
Woods.
Hi. I just got done with my daughter's therapy, so I'm not in uniform. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
So I'm Sergeant Woods. I'm a flight chief in Oklahoma City, from the 349th Recruiting Squadron. And so just two things. The first one is just more of a comment. And I think why so many people struggle, myself included, with work-life balance is just because it's not something that I think is truly obtainable. When you look at the work week, we start out with 5 work days and 2 rest days. So it's already off balance, if you will. So the thing that I've started talking about in my flight, is not work-life balance so much, but boundaries, and having those boundaries and setting those boundaries, because boundaries is something that you can put a name to it. You can put a time to it. You can put, I'm going to go out to dinner with my spouse and leave my phone in the car. I'm going to take leave and leave my phone. If I have to leave it at my office because I know I'm going to be tempted to look at it, then leave it at your office for the day that you're on leave with your family, and be at the zoo, right? So we've started talking more about boundaries than we have about work-life balance, because I think it's more achievable. And when you can do that, then it's kind of like, okay, I can actually take a minute and I can breathe for, a day, however long it is. So boundaries, I think, is critical that we should start talking about. And then the second thing is, I know a lot of people that I run with in the circle that I run with, we are wanting more leadership, mentorship. You're right. When we came in, some of us old hats, it's a different Air Force. So our NCOs want to see that emotion. They want to see that empathy. They want to see us sit down and have those conversations. But I wasn't raised in an Air Force like that. It was separate your work and your life. Don't bring that to work. So how is AFRS equipping us to be better leaders, as far as, for example, a Dare to Lead facilitator course, and getting us funding specifically to send some of us out, to do that and bring that actual training to us?
Yeah, no, hey, Sergeant Woods, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you're doing with Wired. I still have my mug. It's right over here in my bookcase here in the office. Thank you so much for what you and your team are doing with Wired. But I think I'm going to answer your question with using the example of Wired and AFRS Senior NCO PES. There's a difference between training and mentorship, right? And training and development, right? Training is what we owe you when you go through tech school, when you go to the flight chief course, when you go to Airman Leadership School, NCO Academy. These are our core competencies that we're treating that we're teaching you through training. Mentorship really comes in a lot of different forms in a lot of different ways, right? And we have this conversation a lot, especially at the chief level, right? When we're talking about training and mentorship, and then what's the difference, right? When we talk about training, usually if we want to stand up new training, usually the first question I ask is, okay, what is the training gap that we're trying to address, right? What is the gap that we're trying to address? Mentorship, however, is the opportunity for you and I to build a relationship. It's for you and I to sit there and talk about what is on your mind and what situations that you've got. And it's not just you and I, it's you, me, and Sergeant Bazile. It's you, me, and Sergeant Bolivar. It's you, me, and Sergeant Walker, right? It's this network that we gel with like-minded individuals that have similar interests and similar goals to achieve, not only individually but professionally, for organizations. So that's where it starts. You'd mentioned funding. That is a very sensitive topic right now because, as I mentioned, we were in the fiscally constrained I was in the fiscally constrained Air Force before the near peer competition Air Force. And I'm a little bit worried about the direction that we're going with some of our funding. And we have bills that we need to pay. And in order, I was just meeting with our half FM yesterday. And we talked about, okay, hey, how do we pay for this? Well, we can pay for this, but it's got to come out over here because we're in a zero-sum game. We're in a zero-sum balance sheet, if you will, right? So if we're going to pay for one thing, we got to take it from somewhere else. So funded courses, I definitely encourage you to look at your own tuition assistance for undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. I encourage you to use AFCOOL for commercial certifications. I just completed a commercial certification last Monday, which was it was hard, but even at this point in my career, I'm still learning. and still striving to try to get that development. So you've got those resources that you can tap into. And then a lot of it is opportunities that you'll get either through a local installation, through organizations like AFRS Top 3, and from each other, right? And that's what I've got for you. Hopefully I answered your question, addressed your concern. But again, I think, I'm a fan of the comment, iron sharpens iron. If I share information with you, if I build a relationship, a professional relationship with you based on trust and mutual respect, and likewise, we have this relationship, we sharpen each other. And I've got 64 participants on this call that we are sharpening each other right now. We're building trust, we're building relationships. This is a moment that we have, and no one can ever take it away. All 65 of us on this call.
Thank you, Steve, and thank
Thank
you
you,
for sharing your story with us. Truly.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. This is that awkward silence.
I'll break the awkward silence, Chief.
Thank you.
While I'm talking, if anyone has any questions, throw them in the chat or interrupt me, because one thing that we as an executive council wanted to do, and next week at the SLC, we'll have the opportunity to present it in person. But as a top 3 council, we wanted to present you with one of our coins. So I'm gonna bring it up. Hopefully the background doesn't make it a little awkward, but obviously it's got our AFRS logo on it. It's the shape of a compass because obviously it's our job to guide as senior NCOs, and it has our recruiting service top 3 logo on it. So we'll present it in person, but I wanted to do it here in a public forum. Thank you for everything that you're doing for us. Thanks for taking the time to open up this morning, both personally and for the PES. But you're right. Truly, our airmen need to hear that it's okay, right? We have to educate ourselves, whether it's BAH, whether it's our job, whether it's mental health, regardless of what it is, education's important. If you don't know it, look it up, find a book, read on it, ask someone for help who is educated in it. Expectation management, that's another thing, not just with BAH, but with everything we do, right? Some people think I deserve the force distribution rating X. I deserve this, I deserve that. Sometimes it's expectation management, having that hard conversation like you mentioned earlier. Hey, right now the Air Force is in a situation where you're not the best fit for it. Having those tough talks is what we get paid to do as senior NCOs. And then planning. Everything, like you said, our first mission critical task is planning. We have to align everything we do with a plan. In other words, life can be chaotic. And we talk about work-life balance. How do you stay in balance if you don't have a plan? Because you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. It throws you off balance. So just kind of recapping everything you said, that's the main core of what I took away. And I hope that's on par with what you were getting at.
Absolutely. Hey, Sergeant Parton, I'm going to start taking you when I go places, man, because that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Chief. We really appreciate you taking the time to start us off.
Yeah.
Is there any final questions before Chief takes off?
Hey, if there are no questions, let me provide just a couple of closing comments, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much. So again, going back to the way I started, let me finish with this. Again, just thank you. Thank you for the time that you're taking to be part of this professional enhancement seminar. Thank you for what you're doing for our airmen, right? I sometimes miss being at the level that you're at, right? Because you get to know and attack not only our mission, but the needs of our airmen every day at your respective level. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I really, really miss that. The last thing I'll leave you with is this, right? When our airmen come talk to you, make sure you make the time for them, right? When they come to that door and they're, hey, sir, ma'am, you got a minute? Stop what you're doing and pay attention to them, because they chose you to talk to. They probably practiced what it was that they wanted to say to you. Make sure you give them your undivided attention. Because if you don't, and that airman walks away from that encounter feeling as if they've been blown off or that you didn't have time for them, you're done leading that airman at that point, right? So make sure that you're making time for airmen. Maybe you can't talk to them in that moment in time. Let them know that they can always come back, schedule an appointment, say, hey, call me later, shoot me a text, let me know when you're available, and I'll get back with you later, right? We're not always available at that moment, but make sure you go back and you circle back with that airman, because if you don't do that, you're done leading that airman at that point. Okay. But thank you for what you guys are doing every day. I've seen your schedule, absolutely fantastic. I'm really excited about Chief Zachary talking to you guys tomorrow. I'll tell you, if you don't know him, outstanding man. He was command chief at Laughlin. He and I were stationed together at Ramstein Air Base. We were both master sergeants, and now he's at, as you know, he's there at I think at AFSOC. No, AFSOC.
U.S. SOCOM.
U.S. SOCOM, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a great man. I think you guys really enjoy that interaction with him tomorrow. I'll be dialing in on that tomorrow just to hear him speak. I'll be on my way to the airport. Anyone on here from Boise? I'll be up in Boise on Thursday, so looking forward to that. Sergeant Wolf, you from Boise?
Yes, sir. We'll
All right, man. Looking forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Likewise.
All right, buddy. All right. Hey, teammates, again, thank you so much. If there's no other questions, really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the Professional Enhancement Seminar. And just thank you guys for what you guys do every day. I sincerely mean that. And thank you for the coin. It means a lot. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Chief. Thank you again for taking the time to open this up for us today.
Thank you.
And with those great closing comments, I'm going to transition over to our president, Sergeant Weinberg. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Parson. What's our timeline? I don't have the schedule up in front of me currently. Do you have it sitting there?
I do. So Chief Rawls is starting at 10:30 Central Time. Well, so if you want to pass it over to him, and then you can take it over afterwards, then that's up to you.
Let's switch that. Chief Rawls is a busy man. So Sergeant Walker, do you want to start this off with Chief Rawls?
Yes, sir. All right, just wanted to echo what Sergeant Parsons said. Thanks again, Chief Goldstrom, for your insight today. Definitely some valuable information that we'll be able to bring back to our teams. With that said, following your words, a tough spot to follow. We have Chief Master Sergeant Rawls, our AFRS functional manager. We have him on the agenda today. He's going to be speaking on the FY20 board process as well as our assignments. With that said, the floor is yours, Chief.
Appreciate it, Caleb. And what an act to follow, Chief Goldstrom. It seems to be I'm always in this space, and he always does me dirty in that regard. I'd like to shout out to the other chiefs that are on the call. Appreciate your presence, Sergeant Chief Whitney, Chief Pearson, Chief Hart, Chief Gardenius. It showed in leadership, your participation. I see a lot of folks that I recognize have met it over the past. Sergeant Parsons, I haven't forgot about you, so please forgive me. It's just been really busy here lately. But to the point, the promotion boards and assignments. I think I've got 30 minutes to be able to knock out both. And Chief Goldstrom has went long, so I'm going to try to make up some ground in that regard. But I'm not sure if I can share the slides. Have I got that ability?
If not, we'll fix it right now, Chief.
Yeah, do that, because this is very.
You should be ready.
The granularity.
And take as much time as you need. The president can cut his time.
Okay, that's not great. He'll be able to respond in kind. All right, I want to share.
And Chief, just want to let you know we do have you down for 1 hour, so I don't know if your schedule will allow that, but you're welcome to take as much time as you need.
Copy. All right. All right, are we sharing? you can see the slides.
Chief, we can see that you're trying to share them. They just haven't loaded just yet.
Yeah.
We can see him now, Chief.
Okay. So yeah, to reiterate, I had the pleasure this year of sitting on the Senior Master Sergeant Board. It was scheduled for the entirety of the month of February, although we were able to wrap up a little bit sooner than scheduled. And so very the experience was something that when you get the opportunity, and hopefully most of you will, you'll be able to take part in it. There were over 17,000 records that we looked at, and particularly for me, if you think grading a 1206 and stuff, try 1,300 records in an AFSC that's not your own. In addition to your records is in the 8R world, which is what we're more comfortable with. But our panel was charged with scoring not only the 8Rs but also the first sergeants, and so it was very time consuming to get that battle rhythm down to where it was manageable. And I'll go into it more deeply into with regard to how we manage that battle rhythm, that frequency. But yeah, it was very enlightening on how that went through. The actual training sessions and the debriefs and whatnot. So excited to share the slides with you. We had to kind of keep a lid on it until the actual release. And so we'll get right into it with regard to what we can share, what is public knowledge. But I'm going to take questions afterwards for sure, and I'll try to answer them as clearly as I can, but understand, the specifics with regard to individual records, individual panel conversations are held in confidence. So those are off limits, but anything else we'll cover whatever you want. So this board, recording each board score, trying to determine the best folks that were qualified for promotion. This next slide here is the overview, orientation briefing, board president remarks. For those, like I said, who didn't have any previous board experience, there was no real concern because the first part of the day we pretty much got prepared. By the time we actually scored our first live record, we knew the process, our role in the process. We were comfortable with the actual scoring scales. So, with the information from the selection record, we accomplished in quick fashion what our charge was. We accomplished through a briefing followed by the trial run exercise. I'll talk about the briefing as well. We discussed the authority of who was conducting the board, who we were reporting to. We talked about the board organization and discussed the eligibility criteria. The formal board charge, I'll briefly speak to that as well. There was a lead recorder for each board, so any type of conversation that we did have was recorded. And then our board president would read the formal charge to us verbatim. Following that, the board chief administered our oath. And not only that, but the board president administered oath as well to the secretariat staff. Now, the great thing is the staff, the secretariat staff is right across the street. So we had already been over there touring on occasion. So we were familiar with the layout, but the technology that they've got in the 5 years since, or the 10 years since I've made senior has completely went online, paperless. And so it makes it so much easier to be able to evaluate instead of having the old application, the paper scoring. Authority. The authority for conducting all the promotion boards, it's in DOD and AF policy. For example, Title 10 tells us how many seniors that we have in the Air Force, 2.5% of the force. And then Title 37 of U.S. Code specifies the minimum time in service requirements. Let's see, the 3625, the policy guidance, and then the actual formal charge from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force has specific instructions for the board. And again, that is they take that into consideration. I'm trying to bring up the actual board charge. So the board charge that we're given, I highlighted a couple of interesting areas for the team. In determining who is best qualified for promotion, you will use the whole person concept, giving careful consideration to such factors as job performance, professional competence, leadership, job responsibility, breadth of experience, awards, decorations, and education. Among these, job performance is the most important and must be the primary factor. You will avoid equalizing the value of performance between airmen and defaulting to or elevating other factors as pass-fail discriminators. Caution will be used to avoid placing undue emphasis on any one factor or statement to include the stratification. It's imperative that you score records based on proven leadership performance and the future potential to serve in the next higher grade. For those that were, we would see a few that had projected date of separation or retirements on the career brief, but that by itself is not sufficient justification for a non-selection. So we were charged with considering all the folks that were meeting that board. The bottom line is we were basing our recommendations only on the material in each senior NCO's record, military record. We could not discuss or disclose the opinion of any person, not a member of the board, concerning a senior NCO being considered unless that opinion is contained in material provided to the board. And then it goes on to say the primary responsibilities, accomplishing the mission with highly effective leadership by leading and managing teams being plural, And in the education, the Air Force places a high emphasis on all post-secondary education, which includes programs at civilian institutions and colleges. That came up in a discussion during the trial run. You know, how much emphasis do you put on education? And, you know, you'd be surprised. There were folks that you know, readily admitted that it's you know, marginal. But then there were those that went back to that formal charge and said the Air Force puts a high emphasis on education. And so folks took from that what they took from it. So, you know, regardless of the panel, we'll get into the split piece. If there were disagreements, we had to get it settled. And sometimes education came up as a point of reference with regard to, you know, resolving that split. So I'm going to go back to attempting to share the slides. Y'all see the slides up?
We see him, Chief. One quick question. Sergeant Walker, our VP, put in the chat. Are you comfortable with this being recorded? We are recording our PES, but if you want us to turn it off, then we can do that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, Chief.
All right, so the board organization. Again, I explained we worked for the Chief of Staff under the supervision of the board president. Each panel consists of one colonel and 2 chief master sergeants. The selection board secretariat used demographic information to ensure that the board membership mirrored the population, the eligible population. For example, if ATC has 10% of the eligible population, the secretariat tries to ensure that 10% of the board member population come from ATC. So the next couple slides will show how that workload was distributed. So an example, panel 4, which was the first sergeants and the recruiters, we scored 1,294 records total in the two AFSCs. You had several maintenance, 3 panels for maintenance alone, and then 5 or 6 support panels. It wasn't uncommon for a panel to score small career fields within a day or two, and then they're switching to a completely separate AFSC. But as you can see, we tried to keep each panel with the same workload. Eligibility criteria, the promotion eligibility cutoff date, 30 September, EPRs, duty information, all that had to be squared away before that date. The date of rank, 20 months as a master sergeant on the first day of the month of the promotion cycle. The associate's degree, this started back in 2019. Master sergeants having to have an associate's degree or higher to be eligible. Past senior master sergeant boards. Even though the number of senior NCOs considered has varied slightly, the overall number of selects each year has remained fairly constant. This is the how the eligibles were assigned. That other column is for small commands or or elements such as Headquarters Air Force, OSI, DIA. The majority of the eligibles had between 15 and 21 years time in service. And then time in grade, the majority of the folks that were eligible had served 6 or less years as a master sergeant. Talked about education. This slide shows the highest level of education by the eligibles, and it's a testament to the force as the strides that we've made in that arena. So at this point, the lead recorder for the board discussed the contents of the selection record and the procedures for scoring the records. This is what we actually would see in EBOS, which is the platform that we used. And so the whole exercise was for us to align all of the eligibles in a relative order of merit to ensure that the best qualified for promotion were promoted. And so this is the tool we use, the selection record. And we used the electronic board operations support system, abbreviated EBOS. So on the left stack, you see the performance reports over the past 5 years. Some of the members had 6 reports simply due to having made master in that time frame and having that cutoff, that SCOD transcend your typical cases. But the vast majority had the top 5 EPRs. Some of them had a training report, if they were currently attending, AFIT, several other reasons why they would be a Form 77 instead of an EPR, maybe a break in service or correction to a military record. So we didn't see a lot of them, but there were a few. In the center, there were also any Article 15s that were filed. Article 15s are good for 2 years or after one senior NCO promotion board. But in the vast majority of the cases, we just saw the declarations. And then the promotion brief, 1-page snapshot, similar to a SURF, but just gets down to the real critical stuff: date of rank, duty history, and academic education. So when we looked at these records, again, we were directed to use the whole person concept. This wasn't the criteria that was just pulled out of a hat. The senior Air Force leaders had reviewed and approved these factors that we were weighing, and were considered the most important factors in the eval process. Factors that were beyond job performance were not listed in any particular order, as I spoke to earlier, nor was any specific weight assigned to any one factor. There was no, with regard to leadership, there's no specific definition or one definition of leadership. So that's why we were asked to draw upon our own experience as Air Force senior leaders to evaluate each senior NCO's demonstrated leadership abilities and potential to serve in those positions. And then we looked at, the job responsibility, looking at the various positions that the members held, the scope of responsibility. We also looked at awards, but we were instructed not to overlook the narrative just because the individual may have received an award. It had to be justified, right? Same thing with the stratification. The actual scoring scale, you can see what we used. It ranged from 6 to 10 in half-point increments. And each year, each board is different with regard to how they establish their scoring scale. We kind of dial it in when it comes to during the actual trial run, and then that first couple of days we see several splits, and so we've got to talk it out and basically sand off a little bit of our edges. And we do that through this split resolution. So all panel members must be present. The scoring stops. A split is when there's a disagreement of 1.5 points or greater. And so all panel members are present, but only the two members that have split can change their score. All panel members can discuss it, but the only two members that caused the split have the ability to change their score. And in every situation, the recorder comes by and helps guide the conversation on what can be said and what can't be said, and records it. So we did a trial run. There was a sample group of records that I think the trial run we had was for training instructors, MTIs, but it was a chance to, like I said, help establish our standard as a panel, and some were Santa Claus, and one of us was a Santa Claus and one of us was a Grinch, which it's good as long as it's consistent, right? And so that's the equilibrium that they continue to try to encourage us, is if you really value education, then go ahead, value it, but make sure that you value it for every record. And so if you don't, then don't. Like I said, you've got 1.5 points to be able to that gray zone. And so we were able to, we didn't have a lot of splits after the first week. I'll put it to you this way, but by the time we got into the recruiting records, we didn't have much of any. So the actual board process itself, you got the trial run, resolved any splits. Now these splits were resolved at different intervals throughout the day, because we didn't want to get so far ahead that the record wasn't still, fairly fresh in our mind. So before lunch, we would resolve any splits that we had. And then in the afternoon before we left, we would resolve any splits. The current promotion policy, promote against Air Force vacancies. The great thing about recruiting is we're not held per se to a 2.5% because we're not an AFSC. We are promoted against Air Force vacancies. And so the ability for us to go beyond what we should be allocated based on what our inventory says is definitely a benefit that we lose if we ever become our own AFSC. So this is something that we were able to exploit this year, because going into the promotion season, we were told we would get one stripe, and that was only out of charity. And so with Chief Daigle taking the lead, we lobbied and explained our situation to where we got the 8 that we ended up getting. But yeah, it was looking pretty slim early on in the year as far as promotion opportunities. So the actual initial scoring, once all the scores have been collected, there's an order of merit. In the example here, the AFSC being considered had a total quota of 39. Now, one of the things that I found, I guess you could say, neat, was I knew before the board even started how many stripes we had. We had a quota of 8, and the first sergeants had a quota of 67. So going into it, we knew what we were going to look for, or how many were going to come out. And at the end of the day, we even had the names. So it was very tempting, to be able to have that information and not being able to share it. But we did, and we kept it under wraps based on the oath that we had taken. And so once we knew what the quota was, the actual cut line was drawn in order of merit at the bottom of the category, and there were some folks that crossed that line, right? So you could be tied at 25.5. We had to break the tie, and so that was the gray zone that we had to spend a couple of rounds trying to break a tie, just to find that last person. Now, granted, we didn't know anything other than these 5 people are looking to. There's one stripe to give to these 5 people. But after we rescored it, if there were no splits, we had no idea who of the 5 people ended up on top. Board president, non-voting member, General Allen, he monitored the board process to ensure that we kept in accordance with the directives. He reviewed the records after we finished scoring, and he was charged with ensuring that the board was fair and equitable. The actual oath that we took, board member cautions. This is, I touched on this. And then the actual review process with regard to looking at your records prior to meeting the board, and then making sure that it's up to date at all times. So with that, I'll open it for any questions.
All right, hey Chief, I had a couple questions that came in. So if you guys have any more questions, please pop them in. But I'm going to go ahead and read off a couple, Chief, that we've kind of developed here. The first one is, from a board perspective, how much of an impact does the duty title have to the board?
It's significant. I'll put it to you this way. It's significant in how the other boards see, or how the other panel members see our positions. There was a lot of confusion with, there was confusion with the first sergeant. I guess there's confusion against, when anybody steps into another person's career field and has to be the arbitrator of who gets promoted and who doesn't. I'll give you, for instance, we were looking at an entire spectrum of records, from enlisted recruiter to trainers to flight chiefs to graduated flight chiefs. And so it was something that the panel members, the other two panel members, couldn't really wrap their head around. Why am I looking at somebody who has no supervision compared to somebody who supervises, 10 or 15. And so again, as the recruiter in the room, I explained, okay, this is why you're looking at master sergeant recruiters. This is why you're looking at, tier 2, and I explained the tier 3 breakdown. And so they understood, and it was, but you still couldn't get around the fact that one duty title was recruiter, and maybe another duty title was superintendent, of Alaska operations, so and those things, again, assuming that duty title will carry over into the actual narrative of the EPR, then obviously it had some weight to it. And so there is some significance when it comes to, what's, just like I read in the charge, that scope of responsibility.
Thank you, sir. So another one, and hopefully you can give us some input on this, and you did already kind of briefly mention it in regards to education and with the charts that you provided, but during the board process, if you can provide us maybe the top attributes that you saw, obviously you can't bring up individual records, but things that stood out, if you could elaborate on those records, right? They had X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, the thing that stood out most to me was the leadership that went beyond the confines of the seat you were sitting in. And there were plenty of discussions with regard to let's say stratifications. There were many first sergeant stratifications that were the number 1 of 10, number 1 of 3, number 3 of 40. And so one of the splits that we had over one of these small pockets of eligibles, we talked that through, And the outcome was arguably folks can't decide what pool of candidates they're going to be swimming with, or how deep that pool is, how shallow the pool is. But what does matter is how they perform within the confines of the assignment. And so, although it was in the back of our mind, if you really had a small denominator, at the end of the day, it was truly the demonstrated leadership from what you were able to do, in spite of maybe in a small unit or in a position that ordinarily wouldn't seemingly rise to the occasion. But yeah, the most important things that I brought back was the ability, our writing ability. Did it carry the message that the intent was that was brought out in the intent? Is the individual bigger, than the position that there's potential. You guys are doing a great job here with the top three. That's one of the things that was noted. Is their involvement outside their primary duty with regard to private organizations, professional development. Education was, quite frankly, for one of the panel members, education was very important, and showing as a senior enlisted leader that we valued that education went a great deal with him. So looking at it, we all try to establish a base level, for all the records from the jump, opening it up, looking at the career brief, and in your mind you give them a number right off the bat, and then they either, as you peruse the record, they either go up or they go down. And so that baseline for some with regard to education is set, maybe above normal, 8 or 8.5 on the basis of having a bachelor's degree. And then as they dig deeper, it either goes up or down. So education is key. If you're not pursuing your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, I would highly encourage you not to give the panel members any excuse to establish a preliminary number in their mind based on looking at the career brief. And that's it's hard to get somebody off the number that they've dug their heels in from the get-go. Okay, so don't give them an excuse. Get the bachelor's degree knocked out. If you haven't, then expect more of the same. Again, you're not going to always get a favorable panel each year when it comes to that the high emphasis that the chief of staff puts on higher education. So my recommendation is take ownership of your records, provide the input. You probably already do, but provide that input to your rater, so they've got some really good workable material, and then take care of the things that you can take care of, because otherwise you're basically leaving it in the hands of a panel member to interpret. So.
All right, sir, just got 2 more that just popped in. I'm going to do my best to read these here. It says, with the importance you mentioned of duty titles from your strategic position, has it been discussed to standardize duty titles across our career field to align more so with the enlisted force structure, as in NCOIC versus MLS and so on?
No, to be honest with you, I think the career brief speaks to that with regard to the AFSC. So if you look at your career brief now, you'll see 8R0, 8R2, 8R3, 8R3, 8R3. And so it's fairly easy to decide who's decide the pecking order, right? And so again, it's a very primitive way of looking at it, but it's real. So I'm not sure how we could reword, the recruiter duty title. NCOIC of Jackson, Mississippi office. If it's a one-person office or a two-person office, it becomes a little bit of a exercise in futility. It's in those tier 2s and tier 3s where the delineation needs to happen. And I think we do a pretty good job with regard to that. But specifically to the revision of 2117, it's currently a project that's sitting in my queue, which has standardized duty titles, and it's got standardized job description. If you've been in long enough, you've probably seen it before. If you've been in long enough, you've probably seen an EPR. You've got an EPR on your record where maybe a quarter of the duty description was still white space because they wouldn't let you edit that duty description. I don't think we're going to go that far with regard to our standardized process. But at the end of the day, there is goodness in having uniformity and standardization. And so we're going to try to deliver that to you within the next couple of months. But as you can imagine, rewriting, revising, updating an entire AFI is a daunting task. So, but more to come on it. But as far as the duty titles themselves, I think because we by the time you're talking tier 3, everybody's staying in recruiting. So there's none of us that are climbing the fence and going back to our career fields. There's no career field to go back to. And so you're competing against your peers, fellow 8R3s. And so I don't think there really is a call for that granularity of distinction, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. And this is the last one in regards to this process, sir. So is the lack of E8 promotions over the last 2 cycles going to play a factor with the pro soup slots? If we get less than, excuse me, it says, if we got less than 15 in the last 2 years and a pro soup slot is a 2-year position, we mathematically won't have enough to replace them all.
Where are they going? That's the thing. They're not. There's a stoppage, and so they're not on code 50s. So those pro soups are sitting in those positions until they're promoted to chief, or until higher tenure, or they elect to retire. So there's a natural blockage, as far as this this great exodus. Now, granted, years ago when everybody had code 50, that was something that we had to consider, but we managed. I think it was just a reshuffling of the deck chairs. But at the end of the day, for instance, this upcoming cycle, we've got a surplus of seniors to the squadrons. So we've got more players than we have squadrons. So it's a good thing now, but the previous year we had a deficit, and so we worked through it. We that's why we've got great leadership and organization for those senior trainers and the ops chiefs being able to step up, like Senior Maldonado stepping up and doing the job. Full faith and confidence that we can get that done until the cavalry arrives.
All right, Chief. Great brief on the promotion board process. We wanted to give you the opportunity to get to your next topic.
Okay, great. So wanted to give y'all a personnel update with regard to the inner workings of my primary duty, being the 8R functional manager and the superintendent here in the division. And so wanted to talk about DSD in the schoolhouse, our manning, retention, and the assignment cycle. I won't spend too long on it, but definitely feel free to ask questions throughout, or we'll save it to the end. The DSD requirements versus actual. And so I'd asked for 487 DSD names for FY21. And I even said, this is the flavor that we want. And then this was a we aimed high, hoping that we could hit our marks, and they couldn't. The spring 2020 DSD cycle was canceled altogether because of the pandemic. And then they combined it with the fall DSD cycle, and they had an equal plus ad out. But even through all those efforts, we still only had 292 of what we had requested. And of the 292, one senior airman, 156 staff sergeants, you can read for yourself. And so the shocking number is below the 70 NCOs DQ. And so we get a list of the folks from AFPC after they do their initial QC, and we find that the ability for airmen to get out of this is fairly easy when all they have to do is go over to the NTF and be able to say a few key words, and boom, their 422 says not eligible. And so what we've seen is a high rate of folks disqualified that possibly should have had that conversation earlier on in the process and not got our hopes up. As far as the school goes, this is what we're looking at with regard to the school dates for the rest of the year. As I said, 229 of the 450 have been programmed. We've had to cancel 2 class seats already in October. We've moved those class seats to later in the year. And as you can see, starting in June, there's going to be a new class every week. It's a surge that that the schoolhouse is going to have to bear the brunt every week for the entire summer until the end of the FY. This shows where we're at as of today, getting those students through the schoolhouse. That deficit of 215, hopefully by the end of the week, AFPC is promised to deliver a healthy list of 350 plus that we can work through. And like I said, you got accounting for a 25% DQ rate. 350 might get us through. And what does this matter to you? These are the folks that are coming to replace not only replace your tier 1 recruiters, because they're on code 50s, they got to go. But they're also helping you with your manning situation. So if you're, below 85%, these are the folks that are coming to the rescue. Active duty in detail, 2, 3. So you see tier 1, 8R0, 1,351 is authorized, and we've got about 88% assigned. Tier 2, 86%. Tier 3, 93%. And I broke down the tier 3, A, B, C, D, to give you an idea of that log jam at the top. You'll see the 8R0 detail by grade. E5, our inventory is 436. We're authorized, 800. So we're 54% manned in staff sergeants, 131% in tech sergeants, and 410% in E7. In our tier 1 8Rs. And you can see the average age of an 8R recruiter, the years of service, you're getting it at 9, 10, 11. And here's our projected grade, or projected manning. This is through December, based on our gains roster and our loss roster. 88% in tier 1, 98% tier 2, 94% tier 3 and above. This is a little bit deceptive because we've got, this is a snapshot through December. But I'll give you, for instance, the cycle that we're currently in has a surplus of tier 2, approximately 40 deep. So the previous cycle that we were in had a surplus of 16 tier 2 members. So if you were a tier 2, you didn't get an assignment, they rolled you over to this assignment cycle. Now there's benefits, of course, more time on station and such, but still you had to wait a little while longer. Well, now we're predicting upwards of 40 folks that are going to not get matched. And so at this point, we're going to have to start considering, what do you do with these folks? What do we do with folks that don't match after that third, after that second assignment cycle? At some point, it becomes Air Force resources. And if you try to hold on to them a little longer, you're then encroaching on their ability to submit for a basic preference, overseas assignments, and the CONUS mandatory movers, opportunities that they have. Retention is we're doing really well. As you can see in the previous years, that 50% who wanted to stay, but only 30% got to. And then we had the half letter that said if the primary AFSC's career field and skill set was above 85%, then they were, it was an automatic release. So we saw an uptick. Right now we're about 66% who want to stay. And then 53% have the ability. At the end of the day, though, AFRS only needs about 45% of those tier 1s to stay, because the numbers are what they are. There's 1,360 tier 1 billets, and there's 560 tier 2 billets. This is the current assignment cycle for 21. If you notice, we changed the name of it to make it a little bit more understandable, a little bit more clear. So the folks that are in this current cycle, 21B, have an ability to be able to anticipate when we're going to come asking, when they're going to be leaving, and then the folks in 21C can forecast it. Your personnelists have a full version of this chart, but it was pretty confusing, you know, even for us. And so I scaled down the actual chart and said, look, give them what they need to know, and then we'll work the details. Because a lot of those timelines that are on the full version are timelines that we have no control over. CFM releases, prioritizations from the group, and such. So this is just the bare bones, what you expect, when you can expect it. So that's it. So I'll pause and open it up for questions with regard to the assignments or anything else that's on your mind.
All right, Chief. Did get 3 came in here. First one is, have we considered changing the speed cap to remove the career airman requirement, which would allow more senior airmen to apply?
We have changed it already, and so I believe it does say senior airman. So with that, our initial ask in 21 or 421, this was actually an ask back in 20. We asked for 80% being staff sergeants, 20% tech sergeant. That didn't work, and so we said, well, what about senior airmen? So we got a commitment from the boss to bring in up to 50 senior airmen. Specific locations, you know, to mitigate any type of perceived risk, right? So multi-person offices within 50 miles of an installation and within 100 miles of supervision. So we gathered a list, sent it over to AFPC and said, if we get any senior airmen, these are the places they could go. So now what we do is we sit back and wait. Now, whether these individuals arrive, we've got one, and hopefully more to come. But at the end of the day, we're on the receiving end of the current DSD process. Now there's there's activities involved in revamping our DSD process, slimming it down to just a couple of career fields. But at the end of the day, I'm anticipating a list of nothing but staff sergeants and tech sergeants this week. However, with that said, I'm going to try to do a equal plus ad for specific locations for first term airmen. Now follow me. A first term airman that's about to get out and they see an assignment available as a recruiter in Little Rock. That might be the impetus to push that button and say, you know what, I'll stay in, especially if we start talking about CJRs and career fields. I'll push the button if I can definitely go to, to Little Rock or Fairview Heights or whatnot. And then, and of course, it's a ruse. The first term airman it's a ruse because they've got to take the assignment. They've got to re-enlist. That's they have to have the retainability, but it does focus our efforts on getting, our recruiters earlier in their career. So we'll see. I'm fully engaged with it. Me and Chief Daigle, we talk weekly with regard to how do we get more senior airmen in our formation.
All right, sir. Yeah, just got a ton of questions just flowed in here, so I'm gonna. Let's see. So the next one, I think we saw this one coming, Chief. 3B assignment list. do we have any, I guess, timelines? And then should our members still be looking at the Ricky for that list or email?
So I'm still dealing with MOIs, to be honest with you. So until I've got a list of assignments, and so in your mind, connect the two. MOI means an assignment that I can advertise or not, right? Because if the person is not staying in recruiting service, then I can't advertise the ad because they're staying the full 4 years and not 3 years, right? We're tracking. So until I get a concise, complete list of MOIs, I don't know what assignments to advertise to you. And until I get the complete MOIs, I can't tell you who's gotten released from all the functions. And so those are the two things that we have to work hand in hand with ATC. I can tell you right now, there's about 6 or 7 MOIs that are still out with the groups, waiting on a decision with regard to what they want to do. So until I get those 6, I can't move forward. And when I say move forward, reach out to the CFMs in all those primary AFSCs and say, can we keep them? They say yes or no. And then when they say no, I should me and Chief Daigle show them the memo and says you got to, you don't have a choice. And so it's a delicate conversation there. But at the end of the day, I've got to make sure that the releases are in hand, and then, and only then, can I release the actual locations to you guys. And so, yeah, that's it. And the one thing that also adds to it is we hire from, whatever is happening upstream affects you guys. So, once Chief Hart made chief, then we knew that there was going to be a vacancy in 6-7. But we had to wait for the senior release because we didn't know who could take 6-7. And so now but who's going to replace, the graduated pro suit positions? We had a couple of positions that had come vacant. So what pro suits are going to be graduated? We got to establish that. Then we got to figure out who's going to take those seats. And typically those come from, you don't go pro suit to pro suit. Those come from those graduated flight chief positions. And so I hate to harp on it, but it's whatever is happening upstream, that has to be positioned and placed and matched first before we can get to, before we can get all the way down to tier 1 to be transparent. So it's all a domino effect, guys, is what I'm getting at.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Also was asked if there's a chance of recruiting becoming an all volunteer force again.
I don't think so. I think maybe a hybrid approach, because here's what you're faced with. If it's an all volunteer force, who's going to go to North Dakota? Who's going to go to Boise? Besides from Southern, that's what we had prior, and that's why we were heavily focused in on the tropical locations. Manning wasn't an issue, but on the East Coast, some of the northern states, we did have an issue. So I say a hybrid approach. I could foresee in future years us still being able to consider volunteers in like a home of record, cultural acumen kind of situation where if this is where you would like to go, then there's an avenue for that. And then at the end of the day, having some sort of forcing mechanism to fill, our northern squadrons, our East Coast squadrons, because right now we're doing fine. So the idea of is there a need, a necessity? It could be argued that maybe we're losing, some talent, but you saw the projected numbers. We would be up in the high 90s if COVID hadn't struck and they canceled spring 20 DSD cycle. We would be up in the mid 90s for tier 1.
Thank you, Chief. Also, what are the chances that we join the total force recruiter assignments and we start sharing goal like the Army does, so that a reserve counterpart would share a goal with the active duty side?
Slim to none, because that won't happen. I mean, there's just certain things that just don't cross pollinate. Their goal is derived from the state. The reserves are derived specifically to a specific wing. Excuse me. And ours is, derived from the PGL that is released each year. And so it changes, it fluctuates. But there's certain things that there is goodness in aligning, but that not being one of them.
Yes, sir. Got another question. There's a rumor about vectoring production superintendents. Can you possibly elaborate on that?
Vectoring 2 pro soups?
Question, sir. There's a rumor about vectoring pro soups.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Well, there's no rumor. It's we do vector current pro soups. The enlisted development team, AFRS has an enlisted development team, and your group superintendent, your division superintendent is a member of it. And so we meet periodically to discuss various topics, one of being vectoring process. And the vectoring process is nothing new to the Air Force as a whole. Every AFSC community has an EDT. We were just late to the ball game. And so what we were being robbed of is talent management. And I say this because previously, graduating pro soups consisted of who signed in before who. And we can all collectively agree that might not be the best capture of talent, is who signed on 1 October and who signed on 2 October. But that was the deciding factor, right? And so with that said, the EDT allows us to review records, speak to each individual candidate, identify what vector, what they would be best suited for. Now, granted, there's only 10 places to go. So of the 28 pro soups, there's only 10 places to go. And so those 10 places are the vectored positions. And, 3 of them being at the group as the training and operations superintendent. Then there's the schoolhouse over at Lackland. There's IG here at AFRS. There's officer of sessions here at AFRS, enlisted of sessions here at AFRS. Standard and command standardization and training superintendent here at AFRS. And then Det 1, diversity inclusion position. So I think I read it off all 10. But those are the 10 positions that are very critical. The scope is very large, and you want the right individuals vectored for those positions, and not the individual who beat the other folks out based on time on station. So, but yeah, the group superintendents are heavily involved in that process. They speak to the maturity level, the potential that these pro soups exude, and we slap the table on a vector, and we vector every eligible at every meeting, and so it's not like a one and done scenario. So yeah, it's a newer concept for us, but not for the Air Force.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I was asked another question about tier 2s. the possibility of maybe opening up a assistant flight chief position, which would in return open up the assignments and provide more opportunity?
Um, so an assistant flight chief. So we already have the highest production per recruiter in the DoD of 2.32. So our recruiters are recruiting 2.32 folks per month. And so you want to increase that. Is that what I'm hearing?
More or less looking for, I guess, just the opportunity for people. So they become a tier 2 and they go right to the assistant flight chief role, more or less increasing the responsibility for those NCOs coming
Right.
up.
No, there hasn't been any discussion about it. I mean, we would be open to it within reason. But sure, I mean, we can certainly, if the narrative is there that if there's a need, again, I just foresee it from the standpoint of resource management. We're not going to get any more recruiters, and now you're going to take away 210 more recruiters, because that's how many flight chiefs we have. So 210 from the tier 1 pool and make them assistant flight chiefs. I don't see an appetite for that, because it's always going to be a zero-sum game. In order to do one thing, you've got to take away from another. And trust me, that's the hardest thing for people to understand in this building when they come to me with these great ideas, and I have to remember who's going to pay the bill. Show me the position that you're going to take that from. And typically, their eyes kind of glaze over and they shuffle outside the door. But that's what we're looking at. Is we're looking at with the number of bodies that we have, what would we like to do? And so it's typically exercise in shuffling the deck chairs to do something else. The entire reason that we've got 96 special warfare recruiters was because our manpower study a few years ago said we needed to shave 96 recruiters from our officer accessions squadrons. And so that's where the 96 recruiters came from.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Are there any discussions about adjusting the PCS rules for tier 3+ personnel and allowing selective assignments to allow for some talent management for personnel within AFRS?
So this is above flight chief, I suppose. This is always an interesting topic. So senior trainer going to be a senior trainer somewhere else, or an ops chief in one squadron wants to move to be an ops chief somewhere else. It is typically the narrative. Now, what we hear is we say, well, the scope, I want to be able to branch off into an assignment at maybe at the group or the AFRS level, but those are few. Those are exceptions. As far as the talent management piece goes, moving laterally does not serve the enterprise in a way that is beneficial. When you're talking about talent management and resource management. And for instance, the senior trainer ops chief scenario, there's nothing that says that squadron commander cannot swap those roles to gain more experience and make that individual more of a complete senior NCO. But as it stands right now, with the resources as strained as it is, it's those folks that are, and you should see it in the next couple of weeks. I keep promising, but you'll see, those graduated flight chief positions come up to fill those vacancies that were just vacated by the folks who made senior. Currently, that's your path, is you're in a billet, and if there's nothing big Air Force wise that moves you out of that billet, then you grow where you're planted and you promote out of that position.
Yes, sir. Another question about assignments. Any potential release date for upcoming flight chief listings?
Yeah, so I touched on it earlier. Once I've got the graduated pro suits matched, should be ATC says this week that we should match our graduated pro suits. Then I'm going to come after the pro suits. So there's 12 individuals that will be getting 12 opportunities to volunteer. And so several of them are on this call. So it'll be a quick turn, and you submit your preferences. The Air Force assignment system will work its magic. It's going to be DROS, joint spouse, EFMP, humanitarian, court-ordered child custody assignment / deferment, and then local utilization, and then time on station. That's typically how you fall in rank order as far as you getting your preference. So once I'm able to seat those pro suits, now I've got 12 vacancies on top of the other vacancies that I had that I can advertise as graduated flight chiefs. Does that make sense? So again, back to the theme of I've got to take care of folks that are upstream before I can get to you. And so, and then it'll be then and only then can I advertise the tier 2 and tier 3 assignments, because they play in the same assignment system. We know that this individual has been vectored for flight. We know that Megan's been vectored for a flight chief. And therefore, we know that that position in the job bank is going to be available. So I can see her position as 2 opportunities, but that's unique with the tier 2s and the tier 3s. Everything else, it's all upstream and has to happen separately and prior to matching that individual. Make sense?
Yes, sir. I'll say we're at 2 more here, sir.
Yeah.
So has there been any thought or any suggestions to help vet new recruiters, such as like a trimetrics or a personality test, something to kind of vet them in?
Yeah, well, they've got the trimetrics at the schoolhouse, but that's after we bought them. So to answer your question, no. We get a list of DSD candidates, and from that list, the recruiter screening team, I say team, it's 2 guys, they reach out to 400 people and they say, hey, get this signed by your MTF. It's basically a behavioral analysis certification, if you will, police, right? And certification by their provider that says that their faculties are intact and that they would be they're qualified based on the SPEAK Act. And so at the end of the day, that's all we've got to go on is the SPEAK Act and the DSD procedural guidance. But it's very generic, as it should be, because there's so many different variables that, imagine a list of 400 names. You've got to put some sort of standard on it, and typically that psychiatric number in their pulleys covers it. with what you're looking at. So now, as far as personality matches, what color lens they are. Maybe that's part of the vectoring process. Maybe that got considered in with the at the command chief, at the squadron, at the unit level when they were vectored in the beginning. You're vectored for training instructor because you're bossy. I don't know. You're a recruiter because you're nice. I'm not sure how the numbers come up and how the names get assigned. I just know that there's not enough. But at the end of the day, it's not like a TAPIS or a behavioral analysis. I think like you're suggesting.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, so this one right here is in regards to us becoming a career field. What are the thoughts about of a few people being allowed to become diamonds and then back to the 8Rs?
You have that ability now. You can become a first sergeant now. Typically there was a stipulation where you couldn't do back-to-back DSDs, but first sergeant is not a DSD any longer. So sure, you can be a first sergeant. What that would entail is you put in a package through my PERS for first sergeant duty. Then what will follow is a code 50 curtailment, assuming that you're tier 2. Tier 3, it would just simply be an ask from AETC via AFPC. They'll turn around and ask me as the functional, and then the career field manager, and then you go. Now the problem is expectation management when they try to come back, because there's always a chance that there may not be a billet that's open during your cycle that you would be returning. For instance, we had 6 carryover flight chief jobs from the last cycle to this one. If you've got to make a decision to come back as a first sergeant within a certain window of time, and we don't have a billet for you, you're in danger of not being able to come back. But that's for all of us. That's even as chiefs. We've seen a couple of chiefs that were able to apply for a mission support group position, successfully get in that position, and then after that 3-year period was up, reapplied for a squadron superintendent position, and we didn't have any available. And so they've got a decision to make. Stay in that career field, try to find another position, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be recruiting. And the same thing can be extended to those folks that return to force, right? We've got folks that want to come back to recruiting as tech sergeants or master sergeants. And at this point in time, there's no positions. And so we politely explain to them, we've got 40 tier 2 recruiters that have no place to go. What are we supposed to do with them? Let you back in? No, we're going to take care of the 40 that we own. And once we get them seated, then we might take care of, looking at opportunities for folks that climbed over the fence a couple years ago, but only until after the folks that are in the yard have been properly taken care of, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Chief Master Rawls, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Master Sergeant Walker real quick.
Chief, we can't thank you enough for coming and speaking to us on these 2 important topics. I'm willing to bet that every person in AFRS is passionate about those 2 topics, promotions, and our assignment process. Thank you for giving us a look behind the curtain and your transparency today and your support for the top 3. With that, we are going to transition over to our president. We're going to ask that everyone just bear with us, stay with us just for a little bit longer. I know that we're running a little over. We wanted to make sure that we relayed all of your questions because that's what this is all about. We have someone in front of you that can relay some information that's very important. So this time last year, we set some big goals as a top 3 of what we wanted to do this year. And we want our president, Master Sergeant Weinberg, to speak on our year in review and talk about what we've done for you as an organization. With that, thanks again, Chief Rawls. I will transition over to Master Sergeant Weinberg.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Walker. Thanks, Chief Rawls. I appreciate that. And before everybody jumps off, because I see people jumping off right now, we did curtail our agenda to make sure that we could meet the E7 call with Chief Goldstrom. So with that, I just want to give a quick update for our year, what we accomplished, and what it looks like going forward for your top 3. So obviously we're all zoomed out, right? We started this with Zoom a year ago, and we started this executive council started at the onset of the global pandemic. Sorry. We were not allowed to travel. Our children were out of school and trying to learn from home, and still, and really still that way in some places. Balancing work and family, all while working from home. We had to change the way we lived. So like Sergeant Walker said, we had to set goals, and we set our goals, pretty heavy goals actually. We wanted a unified top 3, and we want our members to have a voice. So as of today, we have 815 airmen and guardians on Facebook. They're not just only senior NCOs, but total force. We were retired senior NCOs and NCOs and other NCOs gaining senior NCO knowledge through the lens we can provide as a top 3. We've delivered 2 leadership awards each quarter, and last quarter we had the most submissions ever. We started a book club, and that is going amazingly well. A lot of leadership has been learned through that. We did records reviews for NCOs, and that has helped tremendous. It's helped tremendously. We've done monthly mentor meetings with all levels of presenters. So example is like transitioning to civilian life. We've had the chiefs group and a lot of chiefs on. We had the fired up chief. We had the newly minted chiefs, and then we had the Chief McCools last. Still one more that excites us, and it should excite everybody, is that we have Chief Master Sergeant Bass, who will be one of our mentors. And we've set that up for a new executive council already because it takes a long time to get on her books on July 7th at 1300 Central Standard Time. So looking forward to that. We've delivered 800 in scholarship funds, ordered coins and have coins available for purchase. And last but not least, we have 123 AFRS senior NCOs as paid members of our top 3. It's a 146% increase from this time last year. Our goal was to increase members, and through the transparency and everybody having a voice, we have done that. So I really want to thank Chief Gardner as our top 3 mentor this year, and for keeping us in check. And I also want to thank Chief Goldstrom for the continued support and opportunities, and all the other chiefs out there. I know there's a chiefs group, and the top 3 isn't always a priority, but we do want to thank you for your continued mentorship and guidance. So through all this and more, we keep strong, strengthen our bond as airmen and guardians. We made mistakes and learned from them. And I say that from I think all levels of our executive council, and ultimately we ended up supporting each other. We had a great year. We have a text thread that we are constantly talking on. And for example, I was on the Hill Air Force Base top 3 meeting the other month. 4 people zoomed in out of not recruiters. 5 of us were recruiters that were sitting there. So you can see the importance that we have here. We had 75 plus participants today. So that's huge. So my final part as president is this: you take away what you put in. I was humbled when I was voted in, and still humbled today to be able to lead this organization as your past president. I will not interject the newly voted executive council. Our president is going to be Master Sergeant Garza, VP Master Sergeant Woods, Sergeant at Arms Master Sergeant Gilly, Treasurer is Master Sergeant Dodd, and Secretary is Master Sergeant Kulis. Sorry if I butchered your name. I know they are fired up and ready to take the top 3 to the next level. I look forward to following your excellence and will always be a text or call away for any advice if you need it. Godspeed, and I wish everyone a successful next year. Thank you for these great opportunities. And I will say that tomorrow we start at 0900 Central. We have Chief Daigle, our 8-hour career field manager, and then we have Senior Master Sergeant Procaccino for discussing AFRS talent management. And then we have Chief Master Sergeant Zachary, our SOCOM crit, senior enlisted leaders about Air Force culture. So without further ado, I guess I will see everybody at the E7 call with Chief Master Sergeant Goldstrom.